You find yourself standing on the banks of a river, not just any river, but the Yellow River, or Huanghe, as the locals call it. It's muddy, churning, carrying with it not just silt, but the whispers of millennia. You can almost feel the vibrations of ancient footsteps in the earth beneath your bare feet, the ghosts of forgotten ancestors stirring in the humid air. This is where it all began, really. Before written records, before grand palaces, before even the idea of China as a unified concept, there was this river, and the people who settled along its fertile, if sometimes temperamental, embrace. Imagine, if you will, the sheer grit it took to survive here. No grocery stores, no Amazon Prime, just you, your wits, and a hefty dose of optimism mixed with primal fear. You're hunting, gathering, figuring out how to coax sustenance from the land. This is the Neolithic Age, a time of fundamental shifts. You're watching as small, scattered communities slowly, painstakingly transition from nomadic hunter-gatherers to settled farmers. You see them cultivating millet, domesticating pigs and chickens, building rudimentary shelters from mud and thatch. It's slow, arduous work, punctuated by periods of drought, flood, and the occasional saber-toothed squirrel. Okay, maybe not saber-toothed, but definitely a squirrel with attitude. The legends begin to swirl around you, carried on the very breeze that rustles the tall grasses. You hear tales of mythical emperors, figures like the Yellow Emperor, Huangdi. He's said to have invented everything from the compass to traditional Chinese medicine, even though, let's be honest, he probably had a really good team of PR folks. You hear whispers of Yu the Great, who supposedly tamed the devastating floods of the Yellow River, channeling its waters into irrigation systems. Historians still argue whether these figures were actual historical persons or composite representations of early tribal leaders and cultural heroes, but you can feel the enduring power of these myths shaping the very identity of the people. It's a bit like trying to figure out if Paul Bunyan actually existed, or if he was just a really tall lumberjack with an exaggerated ego. As you move through this primordial landscape, you start to notice something peculiar. Pottery. Lots of it. Painted with intricate designs, often in striking black and red. This is the Yangshao culture, one of the earliest widespread Neolithic cultures. You might even pick up a shard, feeling the rough texture, imagining the hands that shaped it thousands of years ago. Then you see evidence of something new, darker, thinner, and polished to a gleam. The Longshan culture's famous eggshell-thin black pottery. These aren't just pretty pots. They represent a refinement in craftsmanship, a growing sophistication in society. Around 2070 BCE, the stories shift from myth to something a bit more tangible, though still shrouded in the mists of time. You start to hear about the Xia dynasty. It's considered China's first dynasty, though archaeological evidence is still hotly debated. You might see what scholars believe are early bronze artifacts at sites like Erlitou, hints of a more complex social structure, perhaps even rudimentary cities. Imagine the sheer wonder of seeing bronze for the first time. Metal that could be melted and shaped, far stronger than stone. It must have felt like pure magic, a bit like watching someone pull a rabbit out of a hat. Only the rabbit is a really sharp axe. Then, around 1600 BCE, things become much clearer, much more defined. You encounter the Shang dynasty, The air crackles with a new energy, a palpable sense of power and ritual. You see magnificent bronze vessels, intricately decorated, used for ancestor worship and lavish feasts. These aren't just pots, they're works of art, weighing hundreds of pounds, requiring immense skill and resources to produce. You observe divination rituals, where priests heat turtle shells or ox scapulae until they crack, then interpret the patterns to predict the future or communicate with ancestors. These are oracle bones, and on them you see the earliest forms of Chinese writing, pictographs and ideograms that are direct ancestors of the characters used today. It's a remarkable connection across millennia, like finding a really old family photo album, but instead of blurry selfies, it's prophecies about the harvest. You're standing in a city now, perhaps Zhengzhou or Anyang, one of the Shang capitals. The scale is impressive. You see grand palaces, elaborate tombs for kings and nobles, often containing chariots, weapons, and sadly, human sacrifices. Yes, it was a bit grim sometimes. Imagine the sheer societal organization required to build these cities, to produce these bronzes, to maintain such a complex system of belief and governance. The Shang ruled through a network of vassal states, with the king at the center, acting as both spiritual leader and military commander. You feel the rhythm of daily life. Farmers in the fields, artisans in workshops, warriors marching, all under the watchful eye of a ruling elite who believed their power was divinely ordained. This is a society taking shape, developing hierarchies, refining its culture, and forging a distinct identity. You watch as the Shang, despite their power, begin to show signs of decline. There are internal feuds, rebellious vassal states, and perhaps a touch of imperial overindulgence. Remember that whole divine right thing? Well, it turns out sometimes the gods get a bit tired of your shenanigans. The last Shang king, legend says, was a bit of a tyrant, fond of drinking and debauchery. Not exactly a recipe for long-term dynastic stability unless you're running a really successful frat house. And then, a new power emerges from the west, from the Wei River Valley. You see them, the Zhou. They are a semi-nomadic people, initially vassals of the Shang, but now growing in strength and ambition. They claim the Shang have lost the mandate of heaven, a concept you'll hear much more about. This is a crucial idea, the belief that heaven grants the right to rule to a just and virtuous ruler. If a ruler becomes corrupt or incompetent, heaven withdraws its mandate, and a new dynasty rises. It's a brilliant piece of political justification, allowing for dynastic change without questioning the fundamental idea of imperial rule. It's like saying, it's not that kings are bad, it's just this king is bad, and he needs to be replaced by someone better, like us. You witness the final decisive battle, the Battle of Muyi, around 1046 BCE. The Zhou forces, led by King Wu, meet the Shang army. Despite being outnumbered, the Zhou are victorious, perhaps aided by Shang soldiers who defected. The last Shang king, so the story goes, immolates himself in his palace, choosing fiery demise over surrender. And just like that, one era ends and another begins. You feel the shift, the palpable sense of a new order taking root. The transition is complete, from the misty origins of myth to the foundational dynasties, laying the groundwork for everything that will follow. As the dust settles from the fall of the Shang, you find yourself under the reign of the Zhou dynasty, a period that will stretch for almost 8 centuries, a truly mind-boggling amount of time, especially when you consider how quickly things change in your own world. Imagine a single family ruling your country from, say, the 13th century right up until Tuesday. That's the kind of longevity we're talking about here. The Zhou didn't just conquer, they revolutionized how power was justified, introducing that absolutely genius concept we just touched on, the mandate of heaven. You watch as the new rulers, particularly the early kings like King Wen and King Wu, cement their authority. They claimed the Shang had become tyrannical and therefore lost heaven's blessing. It was a brilliant move, a bit like saying, "It's not us being greedy, it's destiny." This wasn't just a convenient excuse, it became a cornerstone of Chinese political thought for millennia. A just ruler, a son of heaven, maintained harmony between heaven and earth. If floods ravaged the land or rebellions flared, it was a sign the ruler had lost the mandate, making it perfectly acceptable, even necessary, for a new dynasty to rise. It's a concept that would echo through every subsequent dynastic cycle, a ready-made philosophical justification for regime change. Initially, the Zhou established a decentralized system, a bit like a medieval European feudal system, but with Chinese characteristics. You see the king granting territories to loyal family members and trusted generals, who then became lords of their own domains. In exchange for land and power, these lords pledged loyalty, provided military service, and paid tribute. You might see a lord proudly displaying his bronze ritual vessels, symbols of his status, much like someone today might show off their ridiculously expensive watch. Only these actually had a purpose beyond telling time. This system, known as Fengjian, worked pretty well at first. You witness a golden age of stability and cultural flourishing. Life, for the most part, is orderly. Agriculture thrives, and communities grow. However, as generations pass, human nature, being what it is, starts to complicate things. The ties of kinship weaken, and the distant lords, far from the capital, begin to act more independently. They start to accumulate their own power, raise their own armies, and eye their neighbors' territories with increasing covetousness. You can almost hear the subtle shift in the air, the gentle creak of a system starting to groan under its own weight. It's like a really big family reunion that starts out friendly but ends with everyone bickering over who gets the last piece of cake. Then, around 771 BCE, a catastrophic event shakes the very foundation of the Zhou. Barbarian tribes, perhaps allied with disgruntled vassal states, attack the capital, Haojing. You watch, horrified, as the city falls and King Yu is killed. This event marks the transition from the Western Zhou to the Eastern Zhou period. The surviving Zhou royalty are forced to flee eastward, establishing a new capital at Luoyang. This shift is more than just a change of address. It signifies a massive decline in the central authority of the Zhou king. From this point on, the king becomes largely a figurehead, respected in name but lacking true power. It's a bit like a celebrity monarch. Lots of pomp and circumstance, but ultimately, someone else is pulling the strings. Now, you enter the spring and autumn period, 771 to 476 BCE, named after a historical chronicle. This is where things really start to get interesting and a little messy. The previously subservient regional lords now operate as independent states. You see them constantly forming alliances, then breaking them, engaging in small-scale wars, and vying for influence. It's a bit like a high-stakes multiplayer strategy game, but with real armies and actual consequences. As you observe, you realize this isn't just about territory. It's about prestige, resources, and survival. The Zhou King, sitting in Luoyang, can do little more than offer symbolic approval or moral condemnation. Historians still argue whether this fragmentation was an inevitable consequence of the feudal system or accelerated by specific leadership failures within the Zhou court. Despite the political chaos, this is an incredibly fertile period for thought and philosophy. Faced with widespread disorder and suffering, thinkers begin to ask profound questions about how to restore order, how to live a virtuous life, and what constitutes good governance. You see the emergence of what will become the bedrock of Chinese intellectual tradition. You might spot a thoughtful scholar, deep in contemplation, perhaps in a dusty courtyard or under a willow tree. This is the era of Confucius, Confuzi, whose ideas would shape Chinese society for millennia. You hear him emphasizing morality, ethics, social harmony, proper conduct, and respect for authority and tradition. He believed in the importance of filial piety, respect for elders and ancestors, and the cultivation of ren, benevolence, and li, ritual propriety. You can almost hear his gentle, yet firm voice, stressing the importance of the 5 relationships: ruler and subject, father and son, husband and wife, elder brother and younger brother, and friends. He saw education as crucial for creating virtuous individuals who would then create a harmonious society. Imagine trying to explain TikTok to Confucius. He'd probably just shake his head and suggest you read a good book. Then you encounter Laozi, the enigmatic founder of Taoism. You sense a different energy around him, a more ethereal, mystical vibe. Taoists advocate for living in harmony with the Tao, the Way, a cosmic force that underlies all existence. They emphasize spontaneity, simplicity, naturalness, and non-action. Wu Wei, essentially, letting things happen naturally rather than forcing them. You might see a Taoist sage wandering peacefully through nature, rejecting the rigid societal norms promoted by the Confucians. It's the ultimate chill-out philosophy, a stark contrast to the busy, rule-bound world Confucius envisioned. You also encounter the legalists, a far more pragmatic and ruthless school of thought. They believed humans were inherently selfish and needed strict laws, harsh punishments, and a strong, centralized government to maintain order. They weren't big on warm fuzzies or philosophical debates. They just wanted results. Think of them as the ultimate tough love parents, but for an entire state. You can almost see them drafting their rigid laws, believing that only through iron discipline could a state achieve power and stability. As the spring and autumn period draws to a close, the pace quickens, the conflicts intensify. The smaller states are gradually absorbed by larger, more powerful ones. The polite skirmishes give way to total war. The number of independent states dwindles, and the scale of warfare grows exponentially. This is the prelude to the Warring States period, 475 to 221 BCE, a truly brutal and transformative era. You feel the ground beneath your feet, vibrating more frequently now, not from farming, but from marching armies. Technological advancements in warfare are rapid. Iron weapons replace bronze, making arms more abundant and deadly. Crossbows become common. Siege engines become more sophisticated. You see mass conscription, professional armies, and military strategies focused on annihilation rather than mere subjugation. Gone are the days of chivalrous battles. Now, it's all about total victory, no matter the cost. It's like watching a playground squabble escalate into a full-blown, no-holds-barred gladiatorial contest. The 7 most powerful states, Qin, Chu, Qi, Yan, Han, Wei, and Zhao, dominate the landscape. They are locked in a relentless struggle for supremacy, constantly shifting alliances, engaging in espionage, and deploying innovative, often brutal, tactics. You see entire populations mobilized for war, building massive defensive walls along their borders, digging canals for logistics, and draining swamps for agriculture. It's a period of immense human suffering, but also incredible innovation, driven by the relentless pressure of survival. You witness the rise of brilliant military strategists like Sun Tzu, or at least the ideas attributed to him in The Art of War, advising rulers on how to win. The emphasis shifts from traditional morality to pure power and statecraft. Each state strives to enrich itself and strengthen its military, often through radical reforms. You see the Qin state, located in the West, embracing legalist principles with particular fervor. They implement harsh but effective policies, focusing on agriculture and military strength, creating a highly efficient, centralized bureaucracy. This efficiency, while brutal, gives them a significant advantage. It's like watching a lean, mean fighting machine emerge from a crowd of less disciplined contenders. The independent lords of the spring and autumn period have consolidated into powerful kings, each claiming the mandate of heaven for themselves, eager to unify the fragmented land under their sole rule. The old Zhou king is little more than a historical footnote, a lingering echo of a bygone era. The philosophical debates of the earlier period now have practical, urgent applications as rulers seek the best methods to govern and conquer. The air is thick with ambition, fear, and the promise of a radical, violent transformation. You know this prolonged, bloody struggle can only end one way, with the triumph of one state and the forging of a new, unified empire. The brutal crucible of the warring states period reaches its fever pitch, and you stand at the threshold of a monumental shift. The air is thick with the metallic tang of iron, the distant shouts of training soldiers, and the palpable tension of a continent on the brink. Of the 7 dominant states, one rises with terrifying efficiency and relentless ambition, the Qin state. Remember how they embraced legalist principles with gusto? Well, you're about to see the full, uncompromising force of that philosophy in action. You watch as the Qin, under the leadership of a shrewd and utterly ruthless ruler, King Zheng, systematically dismantles its rivals. This isn't a gentle negotiation, it's a full-contact demolition derby. Their focus on military might, coupled with an administrative structure that prioritized meritocracy over lineage, a rarity at the time, gave them an unparalleled advantage. They weren't just fighting wars, they were implementing total war, mobilizing every aspect of their society for conquest. It's like watching a perfectly oiled, incredibly disciplined machine roll over everything in its path. One by one, the other 6 great states fall. Han is conquered in 230 BCE, then Wei in 225, Chu in 223, Zhao and Yan in 222, and finally Qi in 221 BCE. It's a dizzying, breathless sequence of victories. You feel the immense psychological impact of this rapid unification. For centuries, the people had known only fragmentation, constant warfare, and shifting allegiances. Now, for the first time in over 500 years, the land is under a single, iron-fisted rule. And then, a truly momentous declaration. King Zheng, having crushed all opposition, doesn't just call himself a king. That's far too pedestrian for his ambitions. In 221 BCE, he declares himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. You feel the weight of that title, the sheer audacity of it. He's not just establishing a new dynasty, he's inventing the very concept of an emperor, a ruler whose authority transcends all earthly bounds, reaching back into the mythical past of legendary sage kings and forward into an unimaginable future. It's a bit like deciding you're not just going to be president, but supreme galactic overlord of the known universe, plus some bits we haven't found yet. Qin Shi Huang's reign is defined by an absolute, almost maniacal drive for standardization and centralization. You witness the sweeping reforms designed to erase the divisions of the past. He abolishes the old feudal system that caused so much trouble for the Zhou, replacing it with a commandery and county system. Officials are appointed by the central government, not inherited their positions, and they are loyal directly to the emperor. This creates a much more efficient, top-down administration, ensuring that his will is immediately felt across the vast empire. You see the standardization of weights and measures, so that a pound of grain in one part of the empire is the same as a pound in another. He standardizes the currency, issuing round bronze coins with a square hole in the middle. Imagine the economic chaos before this, trying to trade goods across different states with wildly varying units and monies. It's like trying to pay for your coffee with a handful of random pebbles from your backyard. Suddenly, everything makes sense. Even the axle lengths of carts are standardized, allowing them to fit into newly built road ruts across the empire, facilitating trade and troop movement. This might seem like a quirky detail, but it speaks volumes about his meticulous approach to control. Perhaps most significantly, Qin Shi Huang mandates a unified system of writing. The various scripts used in different states are abolished, and a single, simplified script is enforced. You watch as scribes meticulously copy new dictionaries and decrees, ensuring that communication, laws, and edicts can be understood by everyone across the vast new empire. This act alone is a monumental step in forging a shared cultural identity, a bit like everyone suddenly agreeing on whether it's GIF or GIF. Historians still argue whether this forced standardization stifled regional cultural expression or was a necessary step for national cohesion. But this grand vision came at a steep price. Qin Shi Huang was a firm believer in the legalist idea that strict laws and harsh punishments were necessary for order. You see the implementation of severe legal codes, collective responsibility laws, where families or communities were punished for the transgressions of one member, and brutal suppression of dissent. Scholars who dared to criticize his policies particularly those who advocated for Confucian ideals or harked back to the good old days of the Zhou, faced dire consequences. The most famous example is the alleged burning of books and burying of scholars in 213 BCE. While the exact scale of this event is debated, the message was clear: criticize the emperor, and your ideas, and possibly you, will be erased. He also embarked on colossal public works projects. You see hundreds of thousands of conscripted laborers toiling away, building an extensive network of roads and canals, vital for military movement, communication, and economic integration. And then there's that wall. You look out and see sections of what will become known as the Great Wall. Qin Shi Huang connected and extended existing defensive walls built by various states, creating a formidable barrier against northern nomadic tribes. The sheer scale of this undertaking is breathtaking, a testament to his ambition and the sheer human cost of his reign. It's an engineering marvel, but also a monument to forced labor and suffering. His greatest and perhaps most enduring project was his own mausoleum. You can almost hear the rhythmic chipping of stone and the distant shouts of overseers. He wanted an eternal palace for his afterlife, a testament to his unparalleled power. And in it, he desired an army to protect him in the next world. You hear hushed whispers about an underground army, but you can't quite imagine the reality until you see glimpses of it. Thousands upon thousands of life-size terracotta warriors, each with unique facial features, meticulously crafted, standing guard. It's an incredible artistic and engineering feat, but also a chilling reminder of his obsession with control, even beyond death. Qin Shi Huang was also obsessed with immortality, sending expeditions in search of elixirs and magical herbs. He consumed mercury pills, believing they would grant him eternal life, which ironically likely hastened his demise. You can't help but chuckle a little at the thought of the most powerful man in the world being poisoned by his own misguided quest for forever. The emperor's rule, though short, only 11 years after unification, was transformative. He laid the very foundations of imperial China, establishing a centralized bureaucracy, a unified legal system, and a common culture that would endure for 2 millennia. However, his reign was marked by extreme authoritarianism, heavy taxation, and brutal forced labor. The people, despite the stability, groaned under the immense burden. Rebellions simmered beneath the surface, fueled by resentment and hardship. When Qin Shi Huang dies in 210 BCE, the empire, despite its apparent strength, begins to unravel almost immediately. His chosen heir is sidelined, and a weaker, less capable son is placed on the throne by manipulative court officials. You witness a rapid decline as palace intrigues, incompetence, and the sheer pent-up fury of the populace erupt. The strict legalist system, so effective at imposing order, proved brittle once its iron hand faltered. Without the emperor's overwhelming presence, the system lacked the flexibility or popular support to survive. Rebellions break out across the empire, led by figures like Chen Sheng and Wu Guang, disgruntled conscripts who spark the first widespread uprising. The chaos quickly escalates. Former nobles from the conquered states rise up, eager to reclaim their lost territories and power. You see the Qin dynasty, forged in fire and steel, crumble with astonishing speed. It's a stark reminder that even the most powerful empire can fall if it loses the consent, or at least the terrified obedience of its people. The unity forged by force proves unsustainable in the long run. The stage is now set for a new struggle, as various factions vie for control, hoping to pick up the pieces of the shattered Qin Empire and establish their own vision for China. The Qin dynasty, for all its revolutionary ambition, implodes with astonishing speed, leaving behind a power vacuum and a population reeling from its iron grip. You watch as the unified empire splinters into chaos, a return to the familiar, brutal scramble for power. The air is thick with the dust of collapsing walls and the shouts of rebel leaders, each claiming their own piece of the fractured realm. This period of intense infighting, lasting only a few short years, eventually coalesces around two dominant figures, Liu Bang and Xiang Yu. Liu Bang, a commoner who rose from humble beginnings as a minor official, is savvy and pragmatic. He's a charismatic leader, capable of inspiring loyalty in his followers through his approachable demeanor and willingness to listen. Think of him as the ultimate man of the people, someone you could imagine grabbing a beer with after a long day of, conquering empires. On the other side is Xiang Yu, a formidable military commander from a noble Chu family, renowned for his martial prowess and aristocratic bearing. He's a brilliant strategist, a warrior in the classic sense, but also arrogant and prone to fits of rage. It's the ultimate buddy cop movie. If one of the cops was a humble everyman and the other was a terrifying, muscular, and slightly unhinged general. Their rivalry dominates the landscape. You witness epic battles, shifting alliances, and dramatic betrayals. Despite Xiang Yu's superior military genius, it's Liu Bang's cunning, his ability to attract and retain talented advisors, and his better understanding of the people's desires that ultimately tip the scales. He learns from the Qin's mistakes, understanding that rule by pure terror, while effective for conquest, is unsustainable for long-term governance. He pledges to repeal the harshest Qin laws, lower taxes, and generally be less Qin-like. This makes him surprisingly popular. Finally, in 202 BCE, Liu Bang triumphs. Xiang Yu, defeated and cornered, famously commits suicide. You feel the profound sigh of relief ripple across the land. The Qin experiment was over, and a new era, the Han Dynasty, is born. Liu Bang becomes Emperor Gaozu, establishing his capital at Chang'an, a strategically important and soon-to-be magnificent city. The Han Dynasty begins with a lesson learned. Centralization is good, but brutal authoritarianism is not. Gaozu initially adopts a blend of Qin's centralized bureaucracy with a more benevolent, Confucian-influenced approach. He reduces taxes, lightens the burden of forced labor, and generally tries to stabilize society. You see the immediate effect. Agriculture rebounds, trade slowly revives, and a sense of order begins to return. It's like switching from a diet of rocks and thistles to a hearty, wholesome meal. Everyone feels a little better. The Han Dynasty, which will last for over 4 centuries, 206 BCE, 220 CE, with a brief interruption, is often considered a golden age in Chinese history. You witness a period of immense cultural, economic, and technological flourishing. The very name Han becomes synonymous with Chinese to this day. You are, in essence, watching the foundation of what it means to be Chinese being laid. Under subsequent emperors, especially Emperor Wu, reigned 141 to 87 BCE, the Han Empire expands dramatically. You see armies pushing out in all directions, southward into what is now Vietnam, northeastward into Korea, and westward into Central Asia. This westward expansion is particularly significant, as it leads to the establishment and protection of the Silk Road. You observe merchants laden with precious silks, spices, ceramics, and other goods, venturing across vast deserts and treacherous mountains, connecting China with the Roman Empire and other distant lands. It's an ancient version of global trade, a bit less efficient than express shipping, but far more adventurous. This is a mainstream historical fact, illustrating the Han's outward-looking and economically dynamic nature. The flow of goods isn't just one way. New ideas, technologies, and even religions, like Buddhism, though its widespread adoption comes later, begin to trickle into China along these routes. The Han actively promote Confucianism as the official state ideology. You see academies established to teach Confucian classics, and aspiring officials must now pass rigorous examinations based on these texts. This creates a highly educated bureaucracy, loyal to the emperor and steeped in a shared moral and ethical framework. It's a remarkable system, laying the groundwork for the imperial examination system that will last for almost 2,000 years. Imagine if your entire career path depended on how well you could quote ancient philosophers. Certainly makes those history classes feel a bit more urgent. Technological innovation during the Han is simply astounding. You might witness the invention of paper around 105 CE by Kai Lun. Before this, writing was done on bamboo strips or silk, which was cumbersome and expensive. Paper revolutionizes communication, record-keeping, and the dissemination of knowledge, making literacy more accessible. It's like going from stone tablets to iPads, but without the annoying battery life issues. You also see advances in metallurgy, with more efficient iron production, leading to better tools and weapons. Agricultural innovations, like improved plows and irrigation techniques, boost food production, supporting the vast population. The wheelbarrow is invented, making heavy lifting much easier. You might even see early forms of the seismograph, capable of detecting distant earthquakes, a quirky or fringe tidbit that showcases their scientific curiosity. Historians still argue whether some of these inventions were single breakthroughs or the culmination of incremental developments over time. Art and culture flourish. You see intricate lacquerware, beautiful bronze mirrors, and elaborate tombs filled with exquisite jade artifacts. The Han period also saw the compilation of monumental historical works, most notably Sima Qian's records of the Grand Historian, which set the standard for Chinese historiography. It's a bit like watching a nation write its own magnificent detailed autobiography. However, even golden ages have their shadows. The vast empire faced internal and external challenges. Frontier defense against nomadic tribes, particularly the Xiongnu to the north, was a constant drain on resources. You might see Han generals leading massive expeditions, engaging in both warfare and diplomacy to manage these powerful tribal confederations. Internally, powerful aristocratic families and regional warlords began to accumulate vast tracts of land and influence, sometimes challenging the central authority. The eunuchs, imperial servants often castrated to ensure loyalty to the emperor, also gained immense power in the palace, leading to intricate and often deadly court intrigues. It's like a high-stakes game of political musical chairs, but with lethal consequences if you don't find a seat. Towards the end of the Western Han, the earlier part of the dynasty, you witness a brief but significant interregnum. A powerful regent named Wang Mang usurps the throne in 9 CE, establishing the Qin dynasty. He attempts ambitious land reforms, nationalizing land and redistributing it, but his policies often backfire, leading to widespread discontent and instability. Natural disasters, particularly a massive shift in the course of the Yellow River, further exacerbate the suffering, leading to massive peasant rebellions. It's a stark reminder that even the best intentions can go horribly wrong if not executed carefully, especially when nature decides to throw a curveball. The Qin dynasty is short-lived. In 23 CE, a Han imperial kinsman, Liu Xuan, leads a rebellion that overthrows Wang Mang. The Han is restored, but the capital shifts eastward to Luoyang, marking the beginning of the Eastern Han, 25 to 220 CE. You feel a sense of continuity, but also a subtle difference. The restored Han experiences another period of prosperity, but the underlying tensions, the power of landowning families, the influence of eunuchs, and the perennial problem of nomadic incursions continue to simmer. As the Eastern Han progresses, these internal weaknesses grow more pronounced. Successive child emperors, manipulated by powerful empress dowagers and ambitious eunuchs, weaken the imperial court. Corruption becomes rampant, and the central government's control over distant provinces erodes. You see rising unrest among the peasantry, driven by poverty, famine, and oppressive landlords. Secret societies and religious movements, like the Yellow Turban Rebellion in 184 CE, emerge, promising a new era of equality and justice. These rebellions, though ultimately suppressed, severely weaken the Han's authority and drain its resources. By the early 3rd century CE, the Han Empire is a shadow of its former self. Powerful regional warlords emerge, carving out their own spheres of influence. The central government is virtually powerless, a mere puppet in the hands of various factions. You feel the familiar pattern reasserting itself: internal strife, powerful regional commanders, and a weakening central authority. The Golden Age is fading, giving way to an era of disunity and fragmentation. The once mighty Han Empire, which stretched across the vastness of China and beyond, is teetering on the brink, about to plunge into centuries of political division. The grand edifice of the Han dynasty, once the beacon of Chinese civilization, finally crumbles. You feel the tremor of its collapse, not as a sudden earthquake, but as a slow, agonizing dissolution into fractured pieces. The year 220 CE marks the official end of the Han, giving way to what historians dramatically call the Three Kingdoms period, 220 to 280 CE. It's a time that will become legendary, immortalized in novels and operas, a period of epic heroism, cunning strategy, and devastating conflict. You find yourself in a landscape dominated by 3 powerful warlords who carve out their own kingdoms from the former Han territories: Cao Cao in the north, establishing the state of Wei; Liu Bei in the southwest, forming the state of Shu Han, claiming direct lineage from the Han imperial family; and Sun Quan in the south and southeast, founding the state of Wu. Imagine a gigantic game of rock, paper, scissors, but with armies instead of hands, and the stakes are absolute dominion over a vast land. You observe the endless skirmishes, the brilliant military campaigns, and the tragic betrayals. The Battle of Red Cliffs in 208 CE, just before the official end of Han, is a particularly famous example. You watch the numerically superior forces of Cao Cao suffer a crushing defeat at the hands of the combined forces of Liu Bei and Sun Quan, effectively preventing the swift unification of China under Cao Cao and setting the stage for the three-way split. It's a bit like watching a heavily favored sports team get absolutely trounced by the underdogs, highly satisfying for some, devastating for others. This mainstream historical fact exemplifies the dramatic twists and turns of the era. Despite the constant warfare, this period is also one of significant cultural and technological development. You see advances in cartography, shipbuilding, especially in the south for naval battles, and even mechanical engineering, like the south-pointing chariot, an ancient compass mechanism attributed to Ma Jun. This quirky or fringe tidbit shows the enduring intellectual curiosity even amidst chaos. Historians still argue whether the romanticized narratives of the Three Kingdoms, particularly those emphasizing heroic loyalty and personal honor, accurately reflect the brutal realities of the time. The Three Kingdoms period eventually gives way to a brief, uneasy reunification under the Western Jin dynasty, 265 to 316 CE. You feel a moment of fleeting hope as the Jin conquers Wu in 280 CE, bringing China under a single rule once more. However, this unity is fragile, built on shifting sands. The Jin court is plagued by internal strife, palace intrigues, and succession crises. You see powerful clans vying for influence, and the imperial family itself descends into a series of bloody conflicts known as the War of the Eight Princes. This internal weakness is a gaping wound, and opportunistic forces are quick to exploit it. To the north, various nomadic tribes, who had been gradually migrating into China's northern borders for centuries, see their chance. Known collectively as the Five Barbarians, a somewhat derogatory term referring to the Xiongnu, Xianbei, Jie, Di, and Qiang, they pour into northern China. You witness the devastating impact as their cavalry sweeps through the land, conquering cities and establishing their own kingdoms. In 316 CE, the western Jin capital of Luoyang falls, and the emperor is captured. This marks a profound turning point. For the next 3 centuries, northern China will be dominated by a succession of non-Han dynasties, while the Han Chinese court flees south of the Yangtze River, establishing the Eastern Jin dynasty, 317 to 420 CE, with its capital at Jiankang, modern Nanjing. You are now in the Northern and Southern Dynasties period, 420 to 589 CE. Imagine China split in two, culturally and politically. In the south, you find yourself amidst a series of short-lived Han Chinese dynasties, the Liu Song, Southern Qi, Liang, and Chen. Life here, while still subject to political instability, is generally more refined. The Han elite, displaced from the north, bring their culture, art, and scholarship with them. You see a flourishing of poetry, calligraphy, and painting. Buddhism, which had been slowly spreading into China during the Han, finds fertile ground in the south, becoming increasingly popular and influencing art and philosophy. You might even stumble upon a monk diligently translating Buddhist sutras from Sanskrit into Chinese, a monumental task that enriches the spiritual landscape. Meanwhile, in the north, the scene is drastically different. You witness a kaleidoscopic succession of non-Han dynasties, sometimes dozens of them existing simultaneously. These are the northern dynasties. You see the Northern Wei, 386 to 534 CE, as particularly significant. They are a Tuoba Xianbei dynasty who, despite their non-Han origins, actively embrace and promote Chinese culture. You might see Xianbei rulers adopting Chinese names, wearing Chinese clothing, and even encouraging intermarriage between their people and the Han Chinese. This process of Sinicization is a fascinating phenomenon, where the conquerors are gradually absorbed and transformed by the culture of the conquered. It's a bit like a cultural assimilation program, but in reverse. You also observe the construction of magnificent Buddhist cave temples in the north, such as the Yungang and Longmen grottos. These monumental carvings, commissioned by the Northern Wei emperors, showcase a remarkable fusion of foreign Buddhist artistic styles with traditional Chinese aesthetics. It's a testament to the profound impact of Buddhism during this era, and a striking example of cultural exchange during a period of supposed division. Life in the north during this time is often harsh, marked by constant warfare between rival dynasties. The agricultural heartland of China, the Yellow River Plain, is frequently ravaged by conflict. Yet, innovations continue. You see new agricultural techniques, like the use of the heavy plow, improving yields. The military innovations from the Three Kingdoms continue to be refined. The constant interaction between Han Chinese and various nomadic peoples in the north leads to a fascinating blend of cultures. While conflict is endemic, there's also exchange. New foods, fashions, and customs begin to filter into both northern and southern societies. You might overhear conversations in a market where different dialects and even languages mingle, reflecting the diverse tapestry of the land. However, the political disunity extracts a heavy toll. The grand projects of earlier dynasties, like the maintenance of the Great Wall or large-scale irrigation systems, often suffer from neglect. The constant threat of invasion from the north prevents the southern dynasties from ever truly challenging their northern counterparts effectively. Similarly, the northern dynasties, despite their military strength, often struggle with internal cohesion and the sheer logistical challenge of unifying a vast, diverse territory. As the northern and southern dynasties period draws to a close, you notice a familiar pattern re-emerging in the north. One of the northern dynasties, the Northern Zhou, grows increasingly powerful. Their rule lays the immediate groundwork for the next major reunification. You feel the slow, inexorable pull towards unity once more. The centuries of fragmentation, characterized by shifting borders, cultural fusion, and constant warfare, have prepared the stage for a new, grand imperial order. The stage is set for a powerful general to rise and once again attempt to gather the scattered pieces of China into a single, cohesive whole. The longing for a unified empire, a return to the glory of the Han, is palpable in the air. a silent plea carried on the wind. The long, arduous period of disunity, the constant ebb and flow of northern and southern dynasties, finally draws to a close. You sense a collective sigh of anticipation, a yearning for stability that has simmered for centuries. The stage is set for a powerful figure to emerge, and in the north, that figure arrives in the form of Yang Jian, a general from the northern Zhou dynasty. He is shrewd, decisive, and exceptionally ambitious. In 581 CE, Yang Jian usurps the northern Zhou throne, establishing the Sui dynasty. He immediately sets his sights on the south. You witness the meticulous preparation for the conquest of the Chen dynasty, the last of the southern dynasties. It's a massive undertaking, building a vast navy, gathering immense supplies, and training a colossal army. By 589 CE, the Sui forces invade, swiftly conquering the Chen, and for the first time in over 300 years, unifying China once more. The sound of celebratory drums echoes across the land, a sound of relief and renewed hope after centuries of fragmentation. Yang Jian, now known as Emperor Wen, is a brilliant administrator. He understands that simply conquering is not enough. He must build a lasting infrastructure for his newly unified empire. You see him implement significant reforms, a more equitable land distribution system to reduce peasant uprisings, a standardized legal code, and a more efficient, centralized bureaucracy. He also revives the Confucian examination system, albeit on a smaller scale than the Han, laying the groundwork for a merit-based officialdom. It's like watching someone expertly piece back together a shattered vase, making it stronger than before. However, the Sui dynasty, much like the Qin before it, is marked by immense ambition and enormous, often brutal, public works projects. Emperor Wen's son, Emperor Yang, who ascends the throne in 604 CE, takes this to an extreme. You witness the construction of the Grand Canal, a monumental undertaking connecting the Yellow River in the north with the Yangtze River in the south. This isn't just a ditch, it's a vast network of waterways stretching over 1,100 miles, capable of transporting immense quantities of grain, troops, and goods. Imagine the sheer manpower required, the thousands of laborers toiling away, many dying from exhaustion and harsh conditions. It's an engineering marvel, a vital artery for future dynasties, but also a testament to the Sui's relentless demand for labor. This is a mainstream historical fact, highlighting the Sui's foundational legacy. Emperor Yang also embarks on costly and ultimately disastrous military campaigns, particularly against the Korean kingdom of Goguryeo. You see multiple massive invasions, each met with fierce resistance and suffering heavy losses. These campaigns, coupled with the immense strain of the Grand Canal and other projects, lead to widespread peasant discontent, heavy taxation, and ultimately rebellion. The Sui dynasty, despite its grand achievements, lasts for only 37 years. It's a tragic echo of the Qin, brilliant in unification and administration, but ultimately undone by its own tyrannical ambition and overreach. As the Sui crumbles amidst widespread uprisings, another general rises to the occasion, Li Yuan. A duke under the Sui, he seizes the opportunity, taking advantage of the widespread chaos. In 618 CE, he establishes the Tang dynasty, initially as a puppet emperor for his son Li Shimin. However, it's his son Li Shimin who will become the true architect of the Tang's glory, reigning as Emperor Taizong, 626 to 649 CE. You are now entering arguably the most glorious and cosmopolitan period in Chinese history, the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 CE. If the Han was a golden age, the Tang is a gilded age, sparkling with cultural brilliance, vast territorial expansion, and an openness to the world. Taizong, often considered one of China's greatest emperors, rules with a blend of military prowess and wise governance. You see him solidify the centralized government, strengthen the civil service examination system, making it even more meritocratic, and adopt a more lenient approach to law compared to the Sui. The Tang capital, Chang'an, becomes the largest and most cosmopolitan city in the world. You wander through its bustling streets, a melting pot of cultures. You see merchants from Persia, monks from India, emissaries from Japan and Korea, all mingling, trading, and exchanging ideas. The city is a vibrant hub, reflecting the Tang's incredible openness. It's like Times Square and the United Nations rolled into one, but with more silk and fewer hot dog stands. You might even notice the presence of Zoroastrian temples and Nestorian Christian churches, a quirky or fringe tidbit demonstrating the religious diversity welcomed during this period. The arts flourish like never before. You hear the exquisite poetry of masters like Li Bai and Du Fu, whose verses capture the beauty of nature, the melancholy of separation, and the grandeur of the empire. You see vibrant landscape paintings, intricate pottery, especially the famous Tang Sankai, or three-color glazed ceramics, and elegant calligraphy. This is a period of immense artistic freedom and innovation. Historians still argue whether the perceived golden age of Tang poetry truly reflects the average person's experience, or is a product of elite literary circles. The empire reaches its greatest territorial extent under the Tang. You watch as Chinese influence extends far into Central Asia, controlling parts of the Silk Road and interacting with various nomadic empires. Military campaigns are largely successful, securing borders and expanding trade routes. The empire's administrative system is highly efficient, allowing for effective control over such a vast area. Buddhism reaches its peak influence during the early and mid-Tang, becoming deeply integrated into Chinese society. You see magnificent Buddhist temples constructed, filled with statues and vibrant murals. Monks travel to India in search of sutras, bringing back new texts and knowledge, further enriching Chinese Buddhist thought. However, towards the later Tang, you also witness periods of persecution of Buddhism, often driven by Taoist and Confucian backlash and a desire to seize monastic wealth. The Tang also sees advances in printing technology, though it is still largely in its infancy. You might observe block printing being used for Buddhist texts and eventually for government documents, paving the way for the later invention of movable type. This quiet revolution in information dissemination begins to slowly reshape how knowledge is shared. However, even the most glorious dynasties are not immune to the forces of decline. By the mid-8th century, the Tang begins to face internal and external pressures. The system of equal field distribution, which initially helped stabilize the peasantry, starts to break down as powerful aristocratic families accumulate vast estates. The frontier defense becomes more challenging, and the empire grows increasingly reliant on powerful regional military governors. The tipping point comes with the Anlushan Rebellion, 755 to 763 CE. Anlushan, a general of Sogdian and Turkic ancestry who held immense power in the northeast, launches a massive rebellion against the Tang court. You witness the utter devastation wrought by this conflict. The capital, Chang'an, is sacked and the emperor flees. The rebellion is eventually suppressed, but at a tremendous cost. The Tang central government is severely weakened, losing control over vast swaths of territory and relying heavily on these regional military governors who become effectively autonomous warlords. It's like a massive internal bleeding that the empire can never quite staunch. After the Anlushan Rebellion, the Tang limps along for another century and a half, but it's a shadow of its former self. The power of eunuchs in the court grows unchecked, leading to endless intrigues and assassinations. Peasant rebellions, driven by economic hardship and oppressive taxes, become more frequent. The once mighty imperial army is weakened and decentralized. You feel the slow, agonizing decline, a once vibrant empire slowly consuming itself from within. Finally, in 907 CE, the Tang dynasty formally collapses. The empire fragments into a period known as the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms, another era of intense fragmentation and warfare. The glorious cosmopolitanism gives way to regionalism, and the grand unified empire once again shatters into competing states. The cycle of unity and disunity continues, proving that even a golden age can eventually tarnish and break. The stage is once again set for a new struggle, a new attempt to unite the fractured land under a single, enduring banner. The collapse of the Tang dynasty plunges China once more into a tumultuous period, a fragmented landscape known as the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms, 907 to 960 CE. You find yourself navigating a chaotic patchwork of short-lived regimes in the north and a scattering of more stable, smaller kingdoms in the south. It's a bit like a game of whack-a-mole, where as soon as one power rises, another swiftly falls. However, out of this perpetual churn, a new force for unity begins to emerge. You witness the rise of Zhao Kuangyin, a military general who in 960 CE stages a relatively bloodless coup, deposing the last of the 5 dynasties, the later Zhou. He then skillfully reunifies most of China, though not without some strategic concessions. Zhao Kuangyin establishes the Song dynasty, 960 to 1279 CE, ruling as Emperor Taizu. Unlike previous founders, he famously champions a policy of strengthening civilian rule over military power, a direct response to the warlordism that plagued the late Tang and 5 dynasties. You see him persuade his most powerful generals to retire peacefully, offering them lavish pensions and titles, a stark contrast to the usual brutal purges. It's a remarkably civilized way to consolidate power, like giving your rivals a golden parachute instead of a trip to the gallows. The Song dynasty is often considered another golden age of Chinese history, but it's a different kind of golden age than the Han or Tang. While it might lack the vast territorial expansion and outward-looking cosmopolitanism of its predecessors, it more than compensates with an explosion of innovation, economic dynamism, and cultural refinement. You feel a shift in the air, a more inward focus on internal development and intellectual pursuits. You quickly become aware of the sheer ingenuity that defines this era. The Song is an age of revolutionary technological advancements. You see the widespread use of movable type printing, invented by Bi Sheng in the 11th century. This makes books cheaper and more widely available, leading to an explosion of literacy and the spread of knowledge. Imagine going from painstakingly hand-copying every book to suddenly being able to mass-produce them. It's like the internet arriving, but with more ink and less cat videos. This is a mainstream historical fact, illustrating the profound impact of song innovation. Then there's gunpowder. While invented earlier, the Song apply it to warfare with devastating effect. You might hear the terrifying roar of early cannons, see rockets streaking across the sky, and observe fire arrows raining down on enemy formations. It's a game changer in military technology, though ironically, it won't save the Song from all its external challenges. You also observe the widespread use of the compass for navigation, both on land and at sea, facilitating long-distance trade. The development of sophisticated hydraulic engineering for irrigation and canals ensures agricultural productivity. Economically, the Song period is nothing short of a revolution. You see a vibrant market economy flourishing, far more advanced than anything seen before. Paper money, known as jiaozi, becomes widely used, revolutionizing commerce and making large transactions far easier than lugging around thousands of copper coins. Imagine the relief of merchants no longer needing a wheelbarrow just to pay for a sack of grain. The empire sees unprecedented levels of urbanization, with massive bustling cities like Kaifeng, the northern Song capital, and Hangzhou, the southern Song capital, boasting populations over 1 million. You wander through crowded markets, marveling at the sheer variety of goods, the specialized shops, and the vibrant economic activity. It's a consumer society in its nascent form, a bit like visiting a grand mall, but with less air conditioning and more haggling. The Song also pioneers the construction of huge, technologically advanced merchant ships, known as junks, capable of long-distance sea voyages. You might catch a glimpse of these impressive vessels, with multiple masts and watertight compartments, heading out into the South China Sea, connecting China to Southeast Asia, India, and even the Middle East. This maritime trade brings immense wealth into the empire. Culturally, the Song is an era of immense refinement and intellectual ferment. Neo-Confucianism, a revitalized form of Confucianism influenced by Buddhist and Taoist thought, becomes the dominant philosophy. Scholars like Zhu Xi synthesize these ideas, emphasizing self-cultivation, rational inquiry, and the investigation of things to understand the principle, Li, underlying all phenomena. You might see scholars engaged in intense debates, striving for moral perfection and societal harmony. It's like a philosophical renaissance, where ancient ideas are re-examined through a new lens. Artistically, the Song reaches new heights. You are surrounded by exquisite landscape paintings, characterized by their subtle beauty, atmospheric perspective, and a deep appreciation for nature. Ceramic production, particularly celadon and stoneware, achieves unparalleled elegance and technical perfection. The imperial court sponsors massive encyclopedias and historical compilations, preserving vast amounts of knowledge. You might even stumble upon a group enjoying tea, a refined ritual that becomes an integral part of Song social life. A quirky or fringe tidbit reflecting the era's sophisticated sensibilities. Historians still argue whether the apparent efflorescence of culture and intellectual life was a direct result of Song prosperity or a compensatory response to military weaknesses. Despite this internal brilliance, the Song dynasty faced persistent external threats from powerful nomadic empires on its northern borders. First, the Khitan Liao dynasty, then the Tangut Western Xia, and finally, the Jurchen Jin dynasty. The Song court, prioritizing civilian rule, often tried to appease these powerful neighbors through diplomacy and large annual payments of tribute, essentially buying peace. You see these payments as a continuous drain on the imperial treasury, a quiet admission of military inferiority. In 1127 CE, a devastating blow strikes. The Jurchen Jin invade, sack the northern Song capital of Kaifeng, and capture the emperor and much of the imperial family. This catastrophic event marks the end of the northern Song and forces the court to flee south of the Yangtze River. A surviving prince establishes the Southern Song dynasty, 1127 to 1279 CE, with its new capital at Hangzhou. You now find yourself in the Southern Song period. The empire is smaller geographically, having lost vast northern territories, but it remains incredibly wealthy and culturally vibrant. Hangzhou, with its beautiful West Lake and bustling markets, becomes a magnificent center of commerce and culture, arguably the most populous city in the world at the time. The Southern Song develops a powerful navy to defend its rivers and coastlines from the Jin. You might see the impressive warships, equipped with gunpowder weapons, patrolling the Yangtze, a testament to their adaptability and continued innovation. However, the shadow of the northern invaders looms large. The Southern Song constantly grapples with the question of reconquering the lost territories. Factions at court debate whether to pursue military action or maintain a defensive posture and continue appeasement. You see the tragic story of General Yue Fei, a celebrated military hero who advocated for aggressive campaigns against the Jin, only to be ultimately undermined and executed by court officials who favored peace. It's a heartbreaking example of political intrigue thwarting military ambition. Even with its economic strength and cultural brilliance, the Song's relative military weakness, particularly against the formidable cavalry of its northern neighbors, remains its Achilles heel. The empire is highly sophisticated, perhaps too sophisticated for the brutal realities of steppe warfare. They are like a brilliant, well-dressed person who forgot to bring a weapon to a street fight. This vulnerability will soon be exploited by an even greater, more terrifying force emerging from the steppes of Mongolia, a force that will forever alter the course of Chinese history. The Song, despite its internal grandeur, is simply not prepared for the storm that is about to break upon it. The tranquil, refined world of the Southern Song dynasty, for all its economic prosperity and cultural brilliance, is about to be shattered. You sense an ominous shift in the winds, carrying the scent of dust and distant hooves from the vast steppes to the north. A force unlike any China has ever faced is rapidly consolidating its power, a force that will forever alter the trajectory of global history. The Mongols. You watch as Temujin, later known as Genghis Khan, skillfully unites the disparate Mongol tribes through a combination of military genius, ruthless ambition, and strategic alliances. He forges them into an unstoppable fighting machine, renowned for their incredible horsemanship, disciplined archery, and innovative tactics. They sweep across Central Asia, building an empire of unprecedented scale, conquering kingdoms and leaving a trail of awe and devastation in their wake. It's like watching a sudden, devastating storm front gather on the horizon, moving with terrifying speed and power. The Mongols first turned their attention to the Jin dynasty in northern China, the very power that had driven the Song south. You witness their brutal and systematic campaigns against the Jin, culminating in the fall of Kaifeng in 1233. This eliminates a significant buffer between the Song and the surging Mongol tide. The southern Song, ironically, had even allied with the Mongols against the Jin. A short-sighted decision they would soon bitterly regret. It's a bit like inviting a tiger into your living room to help you deal with a particularly annoying house cat. The full weight of the Mongol war machine then turns towards the southern Song. This is not a swift conquest. The Song, despite their military weaknesses on land, possess a formidable navy, strong defensive cities, and a resilient, well-populated south. You witness decades of brutal, protracted warfare. The Mongols, now led by Kublai Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, learn to adapt. They adopt siege warfare techniques, utilize Chinese engineers and naval experts, and even build their own fleet to challenge the Song's maritime power. You see the incredible endurance of the southern Song people and their leaders. They fight fiercely, defending their cities with ingenuity and desperation. However, the relentless Mongol pressure, combined with internal divisions and the sheer numerical superiority of the invaders, slowly grinds them down. The final decisive blow comes with the Battle of Yamen in 1279. You witness the tragic naval battle where the last remnants of the Song fleet are destroyed, and the last Song emperor, a young boy, drowns himself along with his loyal retainers rather than be captured. The Song dynasty is no more. For the first time in its long history, all of China is conquered by a foreign power. Kublai Khan, having completed the conquest, formally establishes the Yuan dynasty, 1371 to 1368 CE, declaring himself Emperor of China. You stand in the magnificent new capital of Dadu, modern Beijing, a city built by the Mongols, a testament to their ambition and a symbol of their new imperial rule. It's a stark visual representation of a paradigm shift, like walking into your favorite restaurant only to find it's now a completely different cuisine, run by entirely new management. The Yuan dynasty is a period of immense change and cultural collision. The Mongols, though rulers of China, maintain their distinct identity. You observe a clear social hierarchy, with Mongols at the top, followed by various colored eye groups, like Central Asians and Middle Easterners, then Northern Chinese, and finally, the Southern Chinese. This system means that native Han Chinese often find themselves excluded from the highest positions of power, a source of continuous resentment. It's a bit like being a star athlete on your home team, but suddenly sidelined because a new coach brought in all his own players. Despite this social stratification, the Yuan period also marks a fascinating era of cultural exchange. You see a renewed flow of goods, ideas, and people along the Silk Road, now securely under Mongol control across its vast empire. Chinese inventions like gunpowder, printing, and the compass continue their westward journey, influencing Europe. In turn, Islamic astronomy, Persian art, and new crops, like sorghum, make their way into China. You might even meet a curious Italian merchant and explorer named Marco Polo, who allegedly spends years at Kublai Khan's court, marveling at the splendor and sophistication of Yuan China. His detailed accounts, while debated by historians, offer a fascinating glimpse into this period from an outside perspective. Kublai Khan himself is a complex figure. He attempts to govern China using Chinese bureaucratic methods, hiring Confucian scholars, though often from the lower tiers, and adopting Chinese court rituals. He fosters agriculture and trade, even expanding the Grand Canal further. You observe his attempts to balance Mongol traditions with the demands of ruling a vast, sophisticated Chinese empire. This is a mainstream historical fact, showing the pragmatic side of Mongol rule. However, the Mongol rulers faced persistent challenges. Their attempts to launch naval invasions of Japan, kamikaze wins anyone, and Java ultimately failed, draining resources and prestige. Internally, there was always tension between maintaining Mongol identity and embracing Chinese governance. The sheer size of the empire made administration difficult, and corruption gradually crept into the bureaucracy. As the Yuan dynasty progresses, you sense the familiar signs of dynastic decline. Successive emperors after Kublai Khan are generally weaker and less capable. There are frequent power struggles within the imperial court. Natural disasters like famines and floods become more common, and these are often interpreted as signs that the Mongols have lost the mandate of heaven. The paper currency, initially a brilliant innovation, suffers from overissuance and inflation, leading to economic instability. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit demonstrating the economic woes, something you might not immediately associate with the mighty Mongols. The resentment of the Han Chinese population, burdened by heavy taxes, forced labor, and discrimination, grows steadily. Secret societies, often with religious undertones, begin to emerge, particularly the Red Turban Rebellion. You see their members, distinguishable by their red headbands, advocating for the overthrow of the foreign Mongol rulers and the restoration of Han Chinese rule. These localized uprisings gradually coalesce into a widespread rebellion. Among the rebel leaders, a figure named Zhu Yuanzhang begins to distinguish himself. He is a peasant, born into poverty, who had even spent time as a Buddhist monk. He joins the Red Turban Rebellion, and through sheer determination, military skill, and political acumen, steadily rises through the ranks. He is a pragmatic and ruthless leader, learning from the mistakes of previous rebel movements. You witness his gradual consolidation of power, attracting a diverse group of followers and systematically eliminating his rivals. Historians still argue whether Zhu Yuanzhang's humble origins were a greater factor in his success than his strategic genius. The final years of the Yuan dynasty are marked by widespread chaos, famine, and rebellion. The Mongol court, isolated in Dadu, is increasingly unable to control its vast empire. The infrastructure built by Kublai Khan begins to decay. You feel the tide turning, the foreign dynasty losing its grip on the mandate of heaven. The grand experiment of Mongol rule in China is drawing to a close. In 1368, Zhu Yuanzhang captures Dadu, driving the last Yuan emperor, Toghon Temür, back to the Mongolian steppes. The the Yuan dynasty officially ends, and a new native Chinese dynasty is proclaimed. The centuries of foreign rule are over, and the stage is set for a powerful resurgence of Han Chinese identity and imperial ambition. The long shadow of Mongol conquest finally recedes, making way for a new era of restoration and grandeur. With the last of the Mongol Yuan emperors driven back to the steppes, a profound sense of relief washes over the land. You feel the palpable joy of a people reclaiming their sovereignty after nearly a century of foreign rule. Rising from the ashes of rebellion, a new, powerful, and distinctly Han Chinese dynasty emerges, the Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644 CE. Its founder, Zhu Yuanzhang, the peasant-turned-rebel leader, establishes his capital in Nanjing and takes the reign title Hongwu Emperor. The Hongwu Emperor is a fascinating paradox, a brilliant strategist and administrator, but also a ruthless autocrat consumed by paranoia. You watch as he immediately sets about dismantling the last vestiges of Mongol influence and restoring traditional Chinese governance and culture. He reinstates and expands the civil service examination system, ensuring that future officials are steeped in Confucian classics and loyal to the imperial court. This is a mainstream historical fact, showing a return to a fundamental Han governance model. He implements land reforms to alleviate peasant suffering, reforests vast areas, and rebuilds irrigation systems that had fallen into disrepair during the late Yuan. You see the immediate effect. Agricultural production skyrockets, and the population begins to recover. It's like watching a long-neglected garden burst back into bloom. However, his reign is also marked by extreme centralization of power and brutal purges. Having risen from humble origins, he deeply distrusts the scholarly elite and even his own generals. You observe him abolishing the powerful position of prime minister, taking all major decision-making into his own hands. He institutes a vast network of secret police and spies, and you hear whispers of mass executions of officials and anyone suspected of disloyalty. It's a terrifying side of his rule, a reminder that even a dynasty founded on popular rebellion can become fiercely authoritarian. This obsessive desire for control, driven by personal insecurity, is a quirky or fringe tidbit of his personality, contrasting with the more benevolent image of a restorer. The Ming Dynasty is perhaps best known for its grand construction projects and ambitious outward expeditions, particularly under the third Ming Emperor, the Yongle Emperor, reigned 1402 to 1424 CE. He moves the capital from Nanjing to Beijing, the former Yuan capital. You witness the massive undertaking of rebuilding and expanding Beijing, transforming it into the magnificent imperial city we recognize today. This includes the construction of the Forbidden City, a vast complex of palaces, temples, and administrative buildings designed to project the emperor's absolute power and divine authority. It's a truly awe-inspiring sight, a city within a city, reflecting cosmic order and imperial majesty. Imagine trying to get building permits for something like that today. But the Yongle Emperor's ambitions didn't stop at building grand palaces. He sponsored a series of 7 epic maritime expeditions between 1405 and 1433, led by the eunuch Admiral Zheng He. You watch as these colossal fleets, comprising hundreds of treasure ships, far larger and more technologically advanced than anything in Europe at the time, sail across the Indian Ocean, reaching as far as the coast of East Africa. These weren't voyages of conquest or colonization, but rather demonstrations of China's wealth and power, engaging in trade, collecting tribute, and establishing diplomatic relations. You might even see a giraffe being brought back to Beijing, a bizarre and wondrous sight for the imperial court. Historians still argue whether these expeditions were primarily for prestige, trade, or a combination of both. These voyages are a testament to Ming China's technological prowess in shipbuilding and navigation, including the use of advanced compasses and detailed star charts. Yet, after Zheng He's death and the Yongle Emperor's reign, these expeditions are abruptly halted. The official records are even destroyed, and China turns inward. You sense a fundamental shift in policy, driven by Confucian scholar officials who viewed maritime trade and foreign engagement as wasteful and destabilizing, preferring focus on agriculture and defending the northern land borders. It's a missed opportunity for global exploration that will forever remain a historical what if. Economically, the Ming period sees continued growth and prosperity, though with less radical innovation than the Song. You observe a flourishing commercial economy with vibrant internal trade and significant expansion of agriculture. The population grows steadily, and urbanization continues. Silver becomes increasingly important as a medium of exchange, driven by trade with Japan and later the arrival of Spanish silver from the Americas. This creates a more monetized economy, allowing for greater flexibility and growth. Culturally, the Ming sees a resurgence of traditional Chinese arts and literature. You might see the famous Ming porcelain, particularly the blue and white ceramics, reaching new heights of artistry and becoming highly prized both domestically and abroad. Novels, plays, and operas flourish, reflecting the tastes of a growing urban middle class. The scholarly elite produces vast compilations of knowledge, including monumental encyclopedias. It's a vibrant cultural scene, a refinement of earlier traditions. However, beneath the surface of grandeur, the seeds of decline are being sown. Later, Ming emperors are often less capable and more indulgent than their predecessors. You observe increasing reliance on powerful eunuchs who gain immense influence at court, leading to corruption, factionalism, and paralysis of government. These eunuchs, often from humble backgrounds, can be intensely loyal to the emperor, but also ruthlessly ambitious, manipulating weak rulers and enriching themselves through bribery and extortion. It's like a drama unfolding in a gilded cage, with fortunes made and lost on the whim of powerful palace insiders. External threats also begin to mount. The Mongols, though driven from China, remain a perennial threat on the northern frontier, necessitating constant vigilance and expensive military campaigns to maintain the Great Wall. You see the impressive fortifications of the wall continuously maintained and expanded during the Ming, a stark symbol of ongoing defense needs. But a new, more insidious threat emerges: Japanese pirates, known as woku, who raid the southeastern coast. While often depicted as purely Japanese, many were actually Chinese outlaws and merchants operating outside official trade channels. These raids disrupt coastal trade and cause significant economic damage, adding another layer of instability. Towards the late Ming, internal rebellions, fueled by famine, heavy taxation, and government corruption, become more frequent and widespread. You see the empire, once so centralized and powerful, gradually losing its grip on the provinces. The emperor's decrees lose their authority in distant regions, and local officials become increasingly corrupt and ineffective. The vast Ming bureaucracy, once a source of strength, becomes bloated and inefficient. One of the most significant factors leading to the Ming's downfall is a series of devastating natural disasters, particularly widespread famines caused by drought and cold weather during the Little Ice Age. These disasters, combined with the government's inability to effectively respond due to corruption and dwindling resources, lead to massive social unrest. You see desperate peasants abandoning their lands, forming bandit groups, and eventually coalescing into large-scale rebellions. It's a tragic cycle where natural calamity feeds social breakdown. The most prominent of these rebellions is led by Li Zicheng, a former postal courier whose rebel army grows steadily, eventually capturing city after city. You witness the dramatic climax in 1644, when Li Zicheng's forces march on Beijing. The last Ming emperor, the Chongzhen emperor, rather than face capture, hangs himself on a tree in the imperial garden, a poignant and tragic end to a magnificent dynasty. However, the story doesn't end with Li Zicheng's triumph. Another force is waiting in the wings, just beyond the Great Wall to the northeast, the Manchus. These are a semi-nomadic people from Manchuria who had been consolidating their power and adopting many Chinese administrative practices. The Ming general Wu Sangui, defending the Shanhai Pass, a crucial pass in the Great Wall, faced a terrible choice: surrender to the rebel Li Zicheng or ally with the Manchus. In a fateful decision, he opens the gates to the Manchus, inviting them into China to help suppress Li Zicheng's rebellion. It's a decision that will change the course of Chinese history forever, leading not to the restoration of the Ming, but to the establishment of yet another foreign dynasty. The gates of the Great Wall, opened by a desperate Ming general, swung inward, not for a temporary ally, but for the very conquerors who would usher in China's final imperial chapter. You watch as the Manchus, a people from beyond the northern frontier, pour into the Central Plains. They swiftly crush Li Zicheng's peasant rebellion and then systematically consolidate their control over the vast Ming territories. In 1644, they proclaim the Qing dynasty, 1644 to 1912 CE, making Beijing their capital. This isn't just a change of rulers. It's the beginning of a truly complex and often challenging period for China, marking the rule of yet another foreign dynasty, albeit one that would become deeply Sinicized. The Manchus, recognizing the lessons of the Yuan, are far more adept at governing China. They quickly adopt Confucian governance principles, maintaining the existing bureaucratic structure, including the civil service examination system. You see them striving to present themselves as legitimate heirs to the mandate of heaven, protectors of Chinese tradition, even as they impose certain Manchu customs, such as requiring Han Chinese men to shave their foreheads and wear the queue, the braided pigtail, as a sign of submission. This imposition, while a constant reminder of foreign rule, also serves as a mainstream historical fact, a visible symbol of their authority. The early Qing emperors are formidable figures. You witness the reigns of the Kangxi Emperor, reigned 1661 to 1722. The Yongzheng Emperor, reigned 1722 to 1735, and the Qianlong Emperor, reigned 1735 to 1796. This period, often called the High Qing, is another era of immense prosperity, stability, and territorial expansion. The empire grows to its greatest extent, encompassing not only traditional China, but also Mongolia, Tibet, Xinjiang, and parts of Central Asia. You see the imperial army, incorporating both Manchu banners and Chinese Green Standard Army units, effectively securing these vast new territories. It's like watching a magnificent, highly functional machine hum along, radiating power and control. Under these strong emperors, agriculture flourishes, commerce thrives, and the population booms, reaching unprecedented numbers. The economy is robust, based largely on silver coming in from global trade. Culture continues to develop, with advancements in scholarship, art, and literature, though arguably with less groundbreaking innovation than the song. The Qing sponsored enormous literary projects, including the compilation of massive encyclopedias and dictionaries, demonstrating their patronage of traditional Chinese learning. You might observe the intricate beauty of Qing porcelain, often more ornate and colorful than Ming ware, and the detailed craftsmanship of their lacquerware and jade carvings. The grand imperial gardens, particularly in Beijing, showcase stunning architectural and landscaping prowess. You might even catch a glimpse of the emperor himself, performing complex rituals at the Temple of Heaven, reinforcing his role as the Son of Heaven and guarantor of cosmic order. However, beneath the surface of this grandeur, subtle cracks begin to appear, and the seeds of future decline are sown. The very success of the Qing in expanding its territory and population also creates challenges. The vastness of the empire, while impressive, becomes increasingly difficult to govern efficiently. The growing population puts pressure on land and resources, leading to increasing poverty and rural unrest in many areas. By the late 18th century, particularly towards the end of the Qianlong Emperor's long reign, the vigor of the Qing administration begins to wane. You sense a growing complacency, a belief in the inherent superiority of Chinese civilization, leading to a degree of isolationism and a reluctance to engage with the rapidly changing world outside its borders. Corruption, a perennial problem in large bureaucracies, starts to fester within the imperial court and among local officials. The influence of powerful eunuchs, which plagued the Ming, resurfaces in different forms. The external world, however, is no longer content to simply admire China from afar. The Industrial Revolution is transforming Europe, leading to unprecedented technological advancements, particularly in military power and maritime capabilities. Western nations, especially Great Britain, are aggressively seeking new markets for their manufactured goods and new sources for raw materials. Their gaze falls upon China, a vast, wealthy, and seemingly untapped market. You witness the growing imbalance of trade. European merchants, particularly the British East India Company, are desperate to find a product that China wants in return for its silks, teas, and porcelain. They find it in opium. Despite imperial prohibitions, the British illegally smuggle vast quantities of opium from India into China. You see the devastating social consequences: widespread addiction, social decay, and a massive outflow of silver from China, which destabilizes the economy. It's like watching a deadly drug epidemic unfold in slow motion, eroding the very fabric of society. The Qing government, recognizing the catastrophic impact of opium, attempts to crack down on the trade. This leads to direct confrontation. In 1839, the imperial commissioner Lin Zexu confiscates and destroys vast quantities of British opium in Canton. This act, while justifiable from China's perspective, serves as the immediate catalyst for the First Opium War, 1839 to 1842. You witness the brutal reality of this conflict. The technologically superior British Navy, with its steam-powered gunboats and powerful cannons, easily defeats the antiquated Chinese forces. It's a shocking display of military disparity, like bringing a sword to a gunfight, but the other side has a machine gun. This is a mainstream historical fact, marking a humiliating turning point for China. The war ends with the signing of the Treaty of Nanjing, 1842, the first of many unequal treaties. You observe the painful concessions forced upon China, the cession of Hong Kong to Britain, the opening of 5 treaty ports to foreign trade, and the payment of a massive indemnity. These treaties systematically erode China's sovereignty, allowing foreign powers extraterritorial rights, meaning their citizens were subject to their own laws, not Chinese law, and control over customs duties. It's like inviting someone into your house, and they just start rearranging your furniture and telling you what to do. Historians still argue whether China's defeat was primarily due to military weakness or deeper systemic failures in adapting to global changes. The defeat in the Opium War and the subsequent unequal treaties expose the Qing dynasty's weakness and ignite widespread internal discontent. The mid-19th century sees a series of massive rebellions, far more destructive than anything seen before. The most devastating is the Taiping Rebellion, 1850 to 1864, led by Hong Xiuquan, who claimed to be the younger brother of Jesus Christ. You witness the sheer scale of this conflict, a quasi-Christian, millenarian movement that sweeps across southern China, establishing its own capital in Nanjing and challenging the Qing dynasty for over a decade. It is one of the bloodiest civil wars in human history, costing an estimated 20 to 30 million lives. Imagine the sheer devastation, the widespread suffering, the complete breakdown of social order. While the Qing eventually manages to suppress the Taiping Rebellion, largely with the help of regional Han Chinese armies and limited foreign assistance, the victory comes at an immense cost. The rebellion further weakens the central government, empowers regional strongmen, and devastates vast areas of the country. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit in the sense that its religious origins were so peculiar within China's historical context, yet its impact was so mainstream. Other rebellions, like the Nian Rebellion and the Muslim rebellions, further plague the empire. The Qing attempts various self-strengthening movements in the latter half of the 19th century, aiming to adopt Western military technology and industrial methods while maintaining traditional Chinese values. You see arsenals and shipyards built, modern factories established, and students sent abroad to study. However, these efforts are piecemeal, hampered by conservative opposition, corruption, and a fundamental reluctance to embrace true institutional reform. It's a bit like trying to fix a leaky boat by just patching the holes, instead of rebuilding the entire hull. By the turn of the 20th century, China is often described as the sick man of Asia, carved up into spheres of influence by various foreign powers. The once mighty empire is struggling, its traditional ways challenged by an aggressive, technologically superior West and a rising imperial Japan. The seeds of revolution are sown, and the collapse of the Qing dynasty, and with it, 2 millennia of imperial rule, seems almost inevitable. The 19th century bleeds into the 20th with China, under the increasingly beleaguered Qing dynasty, looking less like a majestic dragon and more like a weary, wounded beast. You sense the profound shift in the air, from internal struggles to an existential threat posed by external powers. The sick man of Asia moniker, though harsh, reflects the grim reality. China's sovereignty is systematically being chipped away. You witness the aftermath of the First Opium War and the subsequent unequal treaties. These aren't just one-off concessions. They create a new, humiliating norm. More wars follow, like the Second Opium War, 1856 to 1860, also known as the Arrow War. You see Anglo-French forces, fueled by imperial ambition, again defeat the Qing, leading to more humiliating treaties. Beijing is occupied, the magnificent old summer palace is looted and burned, a deeply symbolic act of humiliation. It's like watching someone systematically dismantle your family home piece by piece, right in front of you. This mainstream historical fact underscores the relentless pressure China faced. These treaties force China to open more treaty ports, grant additional extraterritorial rights, legalize the opium trade, and allow foreign powers to maintain legations in Beijing. You feel the increasing indignation and frustration of the Chinese people as their nation is treated less like a sovereign power and more like a semi-colony. The phrase "spheres of influence" becomes common, with various foreign powers, Britain, France, Russia, Germany, Japan, and the United States, carving out economic and political control over specific regions of China. Imagine your country's map being colored in with different foreign flags, each claiming a slice. The Qing court, deeply conservative, struggles to respond effectively. The self-strengthening movement, as we discussed, tries to adopt Western technology, but it's often superficial and lacks fundamental institutional reform. You see officials trying to build modern arsenals and shipyards, yet clinging stubbornly to outdated governance and social structures. It's like buying the latest smartphone, but refusing to learn how to use anything beyond the calculator app. This internal resistance to deeper change is a significant factor in China's continued decline. Then comes a truly shocking blow: the First Sino-Japanese War, 1894 to 1895. You witness the unexpected defeat of China, not by a distant Western power, but by its smaller, rapidly modernizing neighbor, Japan. Japan, having undergone its own rapid modernization, the Meiji Restoration, had absorbed Western military and industrial techniques with stunning efficiency. The Qing naval fleet, once touted as a symbol of self-strengthening, is utterly annihilated. China loses Korea, which becomes a Japanese protectorate, and cedes Taiwan and the Liaodong Peninsula to Japan, though European powers soon forced Japan to return Liaodong for their own imperial interests. This defeat is a profound humiliation, exposing the utter failure of the Qing's limited reforms and signaling the rise of Japan as a regional power. It's a gut punch, proving that merely copying technology isn't enough. True strength comes from systemic reform. The defeat sparks a flurry of urgent, albeit short-lived, reform efforts. In 1898, the 100 Days reform attempts sweeping institutional changes, including modernizing the education system, streamlining the bureaucracy, and promoting industrialization. You might hear the impassioned pleas of reformers like Kang Youwei and Liang Qichao, urging the emperor to embrace radical change. However, these reforms are swiftly crushed by conservative forces at court, led by the powerful Empress Dowager Cixi, who places the young Guangxu emperor under house arrest. It's a tragic example of a window of opportunity slamming shut, largely due to entrenched resistance to change. The mounting humiliation and foreign encroachment lead to a surge of anti-foreign and anti-Christian sentiment among the populace. This culminates in the Boxer Rebellion, 1899 to 1901. You see groups of martial arts practitioners, known as boxers by Westerners, who believe they are impervious to foreign bullets, attacking foreign legations, Christian missionaries, and Chinese converts. The Qing court, in a disastrous miscalculation, initially supports the boxers, declaring war on the foreign powers. You witness the dramatic siege of the Foreign Legation Quarter in Beijing. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit, as it's a popular movement fueled by spiritual beliefs rather than traditional political motives. However, the rebellion is brutally suppressed by an 8-nation alliance of foreign powers: Japan, Russia, Britain, France, the United States, Germany, Italy, and Austria-Hungary. Beijing is again occupied, and China is forced to sign the humiliating Boxer Protocol, 1901, paying a massive indemnity and allowing foreign powers to station troops permanently in Beijing. The sheer scale of the indemnity is crippling, a burden that will haunt China for decades. The Boxer Rebellion serves as a final, desperate, and ultimately futile attempt to resist foreign domination through traditional means, confirming the Qing dynasty's utter inability to defend its nation. Historians still argue whether the Qing court's support for the Boxers was a strategic miscalculation or a desperate attempt to harness popular anti-foreign sentiment for its own survival. The Boxer Protocol marks the effective end of any real Qing sovereignty. The dynasty is now a mere shell, a puppet of foreign powers, surviving on borrowed time. Despite this dire situation, the Qing attempts a series of new policies. Xinjiang, in the last decade of its rule, you see efforts to abolish the old examination system, establish modern schools, create a national army, and even draft a constitution. These reforms are significant, but they are too little, too late. The Qing's legitimacy has been irrevocably shattered by its repeated failures and humiliations. The seeds of revolution are now firmly planted. Intellectuals and revolutionaries, inspired by Western ideas and the successful overthrow of monarchies elsewhere, advocate for a republic. The most prominent figure is Sun Yat-sen, who tirelessly campaigns abroad, raising funds and organizing revolutionary cells. He proposes the 3 principles of the people: nationalism to rid China of foreign imperialism and Manchu rule, democracy and the people's livelihood, social welfare. You hear his powerful speeches, echoing the yearning for a modern, strong China. The military, once the bulwark of the dynasty, is increasingly restless. Young officers, educated in modern academies, are exposed to revolutionary ideas. The Qing court's inability to control internal dissent, coupled with its abject weakness against foreign powers, makes its downfall almost inevitable. In October 1911, a seemingly minor incident, an accidental explosion in a revolutionary safehouse in Wuchang, triggers a full-scale mutiny among local army units. This sparks the Wuchang Uprising, which quickly spreads across the provinces. You watch as province after province declares its independence from Qing rule. The imperial court is paralyzed, unable to suppress the widespread revolts. It's like a row of dominoes falling, one after another, leading to an unstoppable chain reaction. By early 1912, the Qing dynasty, which had ruled China for 268 years, is no more. The last emperor, the child Puyi, abdicates. 2 millennia of imperial rule, stretching back to Qin Shi Huang, comes to an end. The curtain falls on an era defined by emperors, dynasties, and the mandate of heaven. A new, uncertain, and profoundly turbulent chapter begins, the Republic of China. The aspirations for a modern, strong, and independent China are immense, but the challenges ahead are truly staggering. The ghost of empire may be gone, but its shadow will linger for decades to come. The bells of imperial China fall silent, replaced by the chaotic clamor of a new, fragile era, the Republic of China. You stand in the bewildering landscape of 1912, where the aspirations for a modern, democratic nation clash violently with deeply entrenched traditions, regional power struggles, and unrelenting foreign pressure. The dream of a united, strong republic is born, but its infancy is anything but peaceful. The initial architect of this new republic is Sun Yat-sen, who briefly serves as the provisional president. You might see him, a visionary figure, advocating for his 3 principles of the people: nationalism, democracy, and the people's livelihood. He quickly steps aside, however, in favor of Yuan Shikai, a powerful former Qing general who controls the most significant military forces in the north. It's a pragmatic, albeit risky decision, a concession to military power in the hope of achieving stability. You feel the immediate tension, the uneasy alliance between an idealist and a pragmatist with his own ambitions. Yuan Shikai, however, proves to be less interested in democracy and more in personal power. You observe him systematically undermining the newly formed parliament, consolidating authority in his own hands, and even attempting to declare himself emperor. This is a crucial turning point, highlighting the deep-seated authoritarian tendencies that still plagued China. His betrayal of republican ideals sparks widespread opposition, but his military strength keeps him in power. It's like building a grand modern house, only to have the contractor suddenly decide he wants to be king of the construction site. When Yuan Shikai dies in 1916, the fragile unity he imposed completely shatters. You find yourself in the heart of the warlord era, 1916 to 1928. Imagine China as a vast battlefield, carved up by numerous regional military commanders, each with their own armies, territories, and shifting alliances. These warlords, often former Qing officers or new military strongmen, fight incessantly for control, collecting taxes, issuing their own currencies, and often brutalizing the local populations. You see the immense suffering this period brings: widespread famine, constant warfare, and a complete breakdown of central authority. It's a bit like a chaotic game of Risk, but played out across a real country with millions of lives at stake. This mainstream historical fact showcases the profound instability that followed the collapse of the monarchy. Despite the political fragmentation, intellectual and cultural movements flourish, particularly among urban youth and intellectuals. The New Culture movement, roughly 1915 to 1925, emerges, advocating for a complete break with traditional Confucian values, which they blamed for China's weakness and backwardness. You hear impassioned calls for science, democracy, and vernacular Chinese by Hua in writing, moving away from classical Chinese. Figures like Chen Duxiu and Lu Xun champion new ideas and criticize the old order. It's a period of vibrant intellectual ferment, a radical questioning of everything that had come before. This intellectual awakening is amplified by the May 4th movement in 1919. You witness massive student protests in Beijing, sparked by China's humiliation at the Versailles Peace Conference. Despite China's contribution to the Allied effort in World War I, the treaty awards Germany's former concessions in Shandong province to Japan, rather than returning them to China. You feel the surge of patriotic anger and disillusionment. The May 4th movement, while initially a protest against foreign imperialism, evolves into a broader call for national rejuvenation and fundamental change. It's a powerful moment of national awakening, a collective cry of enough. The chaos of the warlord era and the failures of the early republic also give rise to new political forces. In 1921, the Communist Party of China, CPC, is founded in Shanghai, inspired by the Russian Revolution and Marxist-Leninist ideology. You might see its early members, small in number but driven by a radical vision of social revolution. Simultaneously, Sun Yat-sen, frustrated by the warlordism, reorganizes his Kuomintang, KMT, or Nationalist Party, with Soviet assistance, strengthening its party discipline and military wing. He aims to unify China through military conquest, the Northern Expedition. You witness the initial uneasy alliance between the KMT and the CPC, formed in 1923, both sharing the goal of unifying China and fighting foreign imperialism. It's a strategic partnership of convenience, a temporary truce between two ideologically disparate groups, a bit like two rivals teaming up to beat a bigger bully, knowing they'll eventually turn on each other. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit in the sense that their alliance was so fragile and short-lived. Sun Yat-sen dies in 1925, and leadership of the KMT falls to Chiang Kai-shek, a military officer who had trained in the Soviet Union but was deeply anti-communist. You observe Chiang launching the Northern Expedition in 1926, leading KMT armies northward from Guangzhou. The expedition is remarkably successful, swiftly defeating or absorbing various warlord factions. You feel a sense of renewed hope for national unity as cities fall and regions come under nationalist control. However, the fragile KMT-CPC alliance inevitably breaks down. As the Northern Expedition nears its completion in 1927, Chiang Kai-shek launches a brutal purge of communists in Shanghai and other cities, known as the Shanghai Massacre or the White Terror. Thousands of communists, labor organizers, and suspected sympathizers are arrested and executed. You feel the horror of this betrayal, the sudden, violent rupture that sets the stage for decades of civil war. Historians still argue whether Chiang Kai-shek's purge was a necessary act to consolidate KMT power or a tragic missed opportunity for broader national unity against common enemies. The communists, decimated and driven underground, retreat to rural areas where they begin to reorganize and develop their own strategy of peasant-based revolution, led by figures like Mao Zedong. Chiang Kai-shek formally establishes the nationalist government in Nanjing in 1928, claiming to have unified China. While he brings an end to the worst of the warlord era, his control is often tenuous, with regional power centers still challenging his authority and the communists remaining a persistent, if small, threat in the countryside. The Republican era, though marked by immense internal strife, also sees significant, albeit uneven, modernization. You might see the growth of modern industries, the expansion of railways and telegraph lines, and the development of modern education in urban centers. Women gain more freedoms and educational opportunities. However, the vast majority of the population, especially in the rural areas, remains mired in poverty and traditional ways of life, untouched by the glitter of the coastal cities. As the 1930s dawn, China faces two major threats: the lingering internal struggle with the communists and, more ominously, the increasingly aggressive imperial ambitions of Japan. The shadow of a looming, devastating conflict begins to fall across the land, threatening to engulf the fragile republic and dictate its very survival. The 1930s descend upon China like a gathering storm, casting a long, dark shadow over the fragile republic. You sense the air growing heavy with dread, as the nation faces not one, but two existential threats: the ongoing, desperate struggle between the nationalists and the communists, and the increasingly aggressive imperial ambitions of Japan. First, let's look at the internal conflict. After Chiang Kai-shek's violent purge, the Communist Party of China, CPC, though severely weakened, isn't annihilated. Under the leadership of figures like Mao Zedong, they develop a new strategy, focusing on mobilizing the peasantry in rural base areas, rather than relying on urban workers. You see them experimenting with land reform and guerrilla warfare, slowly rebuilding their strength in remote regions, particularly in Jiangxi province. It's like a tiny, tenacious seed pushing up through concrete, slowly gaining ground. Chiang Kai-shek, viewing the communists as a disease of the heart compared to Japan's disease of the skin, prioritizes their extermination. You witness his extermination campaigns launched against the communist base areas. The nationalists, with their superior numbers and equipment, relentlessly pursue the communists. By 1934, the pressure becomes unbearable. This leads to one of the most legendary and harrowing episodes in modern Chinese history: the Long March, 1934 to 1935. You observe the incredible ordeal as the communist forces, numbering around 80,000 to 100,000, break through KMT encirclements and embark on a desperate, year-long trek across thousands of miles of treacherous terrain, mountains, rivers, and vast plains. They face starvation, disease, and constant harassment from KMT forces and hostile warlords. By the time they reach their new base in Yan'an, Shanxi province, only a fraction, perhaps 7,000 to 8,000, have survived. It's an epic of endurance against impossible odds, turning the surviving communists into hardened revolutionaries and cementing Mao Zedong's leadership. Imagine walking the length of your country, barefoot, while constantly being shot at. That's the kind of determination we're talking about. This mainstream historical fact became foundational to the Communist Party's mythology. Meanwhile, the external threat from Japan escalates dramatically. Japan, fueled by a militaristic ideology and a desire for resources and empire, views China's weakness as an opportunity. You see their actions unfold with chilling precision. In 1931, without authorization from their civilian government, Japanese army officers staged the Mukden incident in Manchuria, blowing up a section of a Japanese-owned railway line and blaming it on Chinese dissidents. Using this as a pretext, Japan swiftly invades and occupies all of Manchuria, establishing the puppet state of Manchukuo in 1932. It's a clear act of aggression, a blatant disregard for international law, and a stark warning of what's to come. Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist government, still focused on fighting the communists, adopts a policy of non-resistance to Japan, hoping to avoid a full-scale war for which China was unprepared. This policy, though arguably pragmatic given China's weakness, is deeply unpopular with the Chinese populace, who yearn for a strong stand against foreign aggression. You hear the growing clamor for national unity, for a common front against the Japanese invaders. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit in how public opinion was so vehemently opposed to the government's official strategy. The pressure on Chiang mounts, culminating in the Xi'an incident in December 1936. You witness a dramatic event where Chiang Kai-shek is kidnapped by two of his own generals, Zhang Xueliang and Yang Hucheng, who demand that he end the civil war and form a united front with the communists against Japan. Under immense pressure, and with mediation from the communists themselves, including Zhou Enlai, Chiang reluctantly agrees. This leads to the formation of the Second United Front between the KMT and the CPC. It's an uneasy truce, born out of necessity, a temporary burying of the hatchet to face a common, more dangerous enemy. Historians still argue whether Chiang Kai-shek genuinely intended to fight Japan before the Xi'an incident or was forced into it by his rebellious generals. The full-scale Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937 to 1945, erupts with the Marco Polo Bridge incident near Beijing in July 1937. You witness the sudden, brutal escalation as Japanese forces clash with Chinese troops, quickly leading to an all-out invasion. Japan aims to conquer China quickly, expecting an easy victory. They vastly underestimate the resilience and determination of the Chinese people. You observe the relentless Japanese advance. Cities fall, often after brutal battles. The nationalist capital, Nanjing, falls in December 1937, leading to the horrific Nanjing Massacre, or Rape of Nanjing. You see the unspeakable atrocities committed by Japanese soldiers against Chinese civilians and disarmed combatants. Widespread murder, rape, and looting. It's a dark stain on history, a moment of unimaginable horror and suffering. As the war progresses, the nationalist government, under Chiang Kai-shek, retreats inland, first to Wuhan, then to its wartime capital of Chongqing in the mountainous southwest. You see the sheer determination of the Chinese people as industries, universities, and millions of refugees move westward, dismantling factories and rebuilding them by hand in remote areas. It's an incredible feat of human migration and resilience, a desperate attempt to keep the flame of resistance alive. The war becomes a brutal struggle of attrition. The Japanese occupy the eastern coastal regions and major cities, but they are constantly harassed by both nationalist and communist forces operating in the vast Chinese hinterland. The communists, under Mao Zedong, gained significant popular support in their guerrilla war against the Japanese, implementing land reforms in the areas they control and portraying themselves as true patriots. China received some aid from the Soviet Union and, after 1941, from the United States, including the famous Flying Tigers Air Volunteers. However, the war is primarily fought by the Chinese themselves at immense cost. You feel the profound suffering of the Chinese people, widespread famine, disease, mass displacement, and the relentless toll of warfare. It's a prolonged, agonizing struggle, a fight for national survival against a technologically superior and utterly ruthless enemy. The war drags on for 8 years. Then, in August 1945, the situation changes dramatically. The United States drops atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the Soviet Union declares war on Japan and invades Manchuria. Suddenly, the Japanese Empire collapses. You witness the immense relief and celebration across China as the war finally ends. China has won, but the cost is staggering. An estimated 15 to 20 million lives lost, vast areas devastated, and the country left utterly exhausted. However, the peace is short-lived. The moment the Japanese surrender, the fragile Second United Front shatters. Both the nationalists and the communists immediately scramble to gain control of former Japanese-occupied territories and seize Japanese weapons. The stage is set for the inevitable, brutal resumption of the Chinese Civil War. The fight for China's future, paused by the common enemy, now begins anew, with both sides hardened by years of war and determined to achieve total victory. The promise of peace, so longed for, quickly dissipates into the roar of approaching conflict. The celebratory fireworks of Japan's surrender barely fade before the grim reality of China's internal conflict reasserts itself. You feel the palpable tension, the sense that a brief, agonizing pause in the bloodshed is now definitively over. The Chinese Civil War, 1945 to 1949, suspended by the common enemy, erupts with renewed ferocity, determining nothing less than the very future of the nation. Both the nationalists, Kuomintang KMT under Chiang Kai-shek, and the communists, CPC, under Mao Zedong, rush to consolidate their control over territories liberated from the Japanese. You see American aid pouring into the KMT, while the Soviets, who briefly occupied Manchuria, provide some captured Japanese arms to the CPC. The stage is set for a direct, ideological confrontation between two vastly different visions for China. Initially, the KMT holds significant advantages. They possess a much larger, better-equipped army, including air superiority, thanks to American assistance. They control most of China's major cities, its industrial bases, and its railways. Chiang Kai-shek, despite his authoritarian tendencies, is recognized internationally as China's legitimate leader. You might see his forces confidently occupying key urban centers, believing that their superior resources will quickly crush the dispersed communist forces. It's like watching a heavyweight boxing match, where one fighter clearly has more muscle and a better training camp. However, the communists, though numerically inferior, possess key strengths that will ultimately prove decisive. Their leadership, honed by years of guerrilla warfare and the Long March, is unified and highly disciplined. Mao Zedong's strategy of people's war, focusing on mobilizing the peasantry, proving elusive and effective. You witness them distributing land to impoverished farmers in areas they control, winning widespread popular support among the rural masses. This is a mainstream historical fact, foundational to the CPC's success. The KMT, meanwhile, struggles with corruption, economic mismanagement, leading to hyperinflation that devastates the urban middle class, and a top-heavy military command that often alienates its own soldiers and the populace. Imagine trying to run a country when your currency is becoming worthless by the day. Not a great way to win friends or influence people. The fighting is brutal and widespread. You observe key campaigns unfold, shifting the tide of the war. In Manchuria, the communists, under commanders like Lin Biao, engage in decisive battles, inflicting heavy losses on the KMT. The communists' ability to integrate captured KMT soldiers into their ranks, often through ideological re-education, further strengthens their forces. It's a testament to their political effectiveness and persuasive propaganda. By 1948, the momentum shifts decisively in favor of the communists. You witness major KMT defeats in crucial campaigns, such as the Liaoshen, Huaihai, and Pingjin campaigns. These are massive engagements involving millions of soldiers, and the KMT suffers catastrophic losses of troops and equipment. The communists, by contrast, are gaining experience, morale, and supplies. They effectively isolate KMT garrisons in cities, forcing surrenders or annihilating them. It's like watching a slow, inexorable military grind, where one side consistently outmaneuvers and outlasts the other. As the communists sweep southward, the KMT's morale collapses, desertions become rampant, and entire units switch sides. The nationalist government, losing popular support due to its corruption and economic failures, finds itself increasingly isolated. You see the rapid decline of cities and provinces that were once strongholds, as the communist forces, now swollen with defectors and new recruits, advance almost unopposed. In January 1949, Beijing falls to the communists. Then Nanjing, the nationalist capital, falls in April. Chiang Kai-shek and his remaining forces, along with many loyalists, intellectuals, and businessmen, begin to retreat to the island of Taiwan, Formosa. They carry with them the national gold reserves and many historical artifacts, intending to establish a provisional government there and eventually retake the mainland. It's a mass exodus, a final desperate gamble to preserve the republic they fought for. This is a quirky or fringe tidbit, the sheer scale of the flight, and what they managed to take with them. Finally, on October 1st, 1949, from the Gate of Heavenly Peace in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, Mao Zedong famously proclaims the establishment of the People's Republic of China, PRC. You hear his booming voice, declaring that the Chinese people have stood up. It's a moment of immense historical significance, marking the end of the Civil War, the end of China's century of humiliation, and the beginning of a new socialist era. The long, bloody struggle for China's soul has concluded, at least for the mainland. Historians still argue whether the communist victory was more a result of KMT failings or the CPC's strategic brilliance. The establishment of the PRC signifies a radical break from China's past. You are now in a nation under a single-party rule, committed to Marxist-Leninist ideology adapted to Chinese conditions, known as Mao Zedong thought. The new government immediately sets about consolidating its control, eliminating remaining KMT pockets of resistance, and initiating sweeping social and economic reforms. The new leadership faces immense challenges: a war-torn country, a vast and impoverished population, and the need to rebuild from scratch. You see the early efforts to establish a new bureaucracy, stabilize the economy, and implement land reform across the country. Landlords are stripped of their property, which is redistributed to the peasants, a move that wins immense popular support in the countryside, though it also leads to violence and purges against former landowners. The international community is divided. Many Western nations, led by the United States, refuse to recognize the PRC, continuing to support the nationalist government in Taiwan as the legitimate government of China. This diplomatic isolation will shape China's foreign policy for decades. The United States, in particular, views the communist victory as a significant loss in the global Cold War. As the dust settles, a vast, unified and communist China emerges onto the world stage. The centuries-long cycle of dynastic rise and fall, culminating in the tumultuous Republican era and Civil War, has seemingly ended. A new, radically different chapter of Chinese history has begun, one driven by a revolutionary ideology and an ambition to transform the nation from a sick man into a powerful, independent force. The consequences of this victory will ripple not only throughout China, but across the entire globe for the remainder of the 20th century and beyond. The year 1949 marks not just a new chapter, but a whole new book in China's long and winding story. You stand on the threshold of the People's Republic of China, PRC, a nation forged in civil war and revolutionary fervor, now embarking on an ambitious, often tumultuous journey of transformation. The old cycles of imperial rise and fall are theoretically broken. What comes next is an entirely new experiment. Initially, the Communist Party of China, CPC, under the undisputed leadership of Mao Zedong, focuses on consolidating power, rebuilding the war-torn economy, and eliminating remnants of the old order. You witness massive land reforms, where land is redistributed from landlords to peasants, a move that secures immense popular support, particularly in the countryside. The party also launches campaigns to suppress counter-revolutionaries, solidifying its grip on power through mass mobilization and political re-education. It's a period of immense social upheaval, where the old hierarchies are decisively overthrown. The 1950s see China largely aligning itself with the Soviet Union. You observe the implementation of the first five-year plan, 1953 to 1957, focusing on rapid industrialization through Soviet-style central planning. Heavy industries like steel, coal, and machinery are prioritized. You see factories rising, infrastructure being built, and a workforce mobilized with incredible intensity. Life for many, especially in the cities, begins to stabilize and improve after decades of war and chaos. However, Mao Zedong, ever the revolutionary, grows impatient with the slow pace of economic development and concerned about the emergence of a new bureaucratic class. In 1958, he launches the Great Leap Forward, an ambitious and ultimately catastrophic campaign aimed at rapidly transforming China from an agrarian society into a communist industrial powerhouse through mass mobilization and collective effort. You see peasants organized into vast communes, backyard furnaces springing up everywhere to produce steel, often of useless quality, and unrealistic production targets imposed from above. It's a mainstream historical fact, illustrating a revolutionary leader's attempt to bend reality to his will. The Great Leap Forward proves to be a disaster. The emphasis on backyard industry diverts labor from agriculture, leading to widespread famine. Exaggerated reporting of harvests, coupled with poor planning and natural disasters, results in one of the deadliest famines in human history, claiming tens of millions of lives between 1959 and 1961. You feel the profound tragedy of this period, the immense suffering caused by ideological zeal and mismanagement. It's a stark reminder that even the grandest visions can have horrifying human costs. The failure of the Great Leap Forward leads to a period of pragmatic economic adjustment and a temporary sidelining of Mao Zedong. However, Mao, unwilling to relinquish his revolutionary vision, launches the Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 1976, another period of radical social and political upheaval. He calls upon the youth, the Red Guards, to challenge traditional authority, target perceived bourgeois elements, and root out revisionists within the party. You witness the frenzied destruction of cultural heritage, the persecution of intellectuals, artists, and political rivals, and the complete breakdown of social order in many areas. It's a terrifying spectacle of ideological purity turning into destructive chaos, often driven by a quirky or fringe tidbit of Mao's paranoia about the direction the party was taking. The Cultural Revolution cripples the economy, devastates the education system, and leaves deep psychological scars on generations of Chinese people. It only truly ends with Mao's death in 1976. Historians still argue whether the Cultural Revolution was a genuine attempt to reinvigorate revolutionary spirit or a calculated power struggle by Mao to regain control. After Mao's death, a power struggle ensues, and eventually, Deng Xiaoping emerges as the paramount leader. You sense a new, pragmatic era dawning. Deng, a survivor of the Cultural Revolution, understands that China desperately needs economic reform and openness to the outside world. In 1978, he initiates the policy of reform and opening up, Gaige Kaifang. You observe the gradual, experimental dismantling of the command economy. Communes are dissolved, and peasants are allowed to farm their own plots and sell surplus produce. Special economic zones, SEZs, are established in coastal areas, attracting foreign investment and technology. You see the incredible energy and entrepreneurial spirit unleashed by these reforms. It's like opening a pressure cooker. Suddenly, a wave of innovation and economic activity surges forth. This era witnesses phenomenal economic growth. China transforms from an isolated agrarian society into a global manufacturing powerhouse. You see cities like Shenzhen explode from small fishing villages into sprawling metropolises. Millions are lifted out of poverty, and a new middle class begins to emerge. The infrastructure projects are massive: high-speed rail, modern airports, gleaming skyscrapers. It's a truly breathtaking transformation, a testament to the power of economic liberalization, even under continued authoritarian rule. However, this rapid economic development comes with new challenges. You observe a growing gap between the rich and poor, between urban and rural areas. Corruption becomes a significant problem. The demand for greater political freedoms also grows, leading to moments of tension. The most prominent example is the Tiananmen Square protests of 1989, where student-led demonstrations for democracy are brutally suppressed by the government. You feel the profound sadness and repression of this moment, a stark reminder that while economic freedom is growing, political freedoms remain severely restricted. As the 21st century dawns, China continues its meteoric rise on the global stage. You see its growing influence in international affairs, its economic power, and its increasing military strength. It hosts the Olympic Games in 2008, a powerful symbol of its re-emergence. You witness its Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure project aimed at connecting China to the world through new trade routes, reminiscent of the ancient Silk Road. It's a bold assertion of its global ambition. Yet, challenges persist. You sense the ongoing tension between economic liberalization and political control. Environmental degradation, due to rapid industrialization, becomes a pressing concern. Demographic shifts, including an aging population, present new dilemmas. Human rights issues and the treatment of ethnic minorities remain contentious points with the international community. And so, your long journey through Chinese history comes to a close. From the muddy banks of the Yellow River, through millennia of emperors, dynasties, wars, and revolutions, you've witnessed the ebb and flow of one of the world's oldest and most enduring civilizations. You've seen periods of unparalleled grandeur, profound suffering, breathtaking innovation, and devastating conflict. Now, as the present melts into the future, China stands as a global power, grappling with its past, navigating its present complexities, and shaping its own destiny. Its journey is far from over, and its story continues to unfold, leaving you to ponder the enduring resilience, adaptability, and boundless spirit of the Chinese people. As your consciousness drifts, the echoes of dynasties fade, the hum of ancient looms, the clang of bronze, the whispers of poets, the cries of rebellion, and the roar of modern industry all soften into a distant memory. You feel the slow, gentle current of time carrying you away from the vast landscapes and bustling cities of China. The scent of jasmine, the feel of cool silk, the faint sound of a distant erhu, they all dissipate like morning mist. The grand tapestry of history slowly folds itself away, tucking itself into the quiet corners of your mind. You're safe, you're warm, and the long, incredible journey is complete. Rest now